Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're diving into something that might seem a little unexpected, poisoning management.
Uh,
And you might be thinking,
yeah.
poison? That's a bit intense, isn't it? But trust me, this is way more relevant than you might think.
Mhm.
We've got two really interesting medical journal articles that are going to guide us
Bro-
through this whole world of poisons and how to deal with them. So, are you ready to jump in?
Absolutely. And you're right, it's surprisingly relevant. I mean, just in 2020, the US had over 2 million cases of toxic exposures.
2 million.
Yeah.
That's more people than, like, some countries. That really puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it's not just, rare exotic poisons. It's everything. Accidental overdoses, even just like unexpected reactions to plants.
Right,
Right.
right. Like everyone's got a story about, a kid getting into the cleaning supplies or taking the wrong medication.
Hmm.
And it's not just accidents either. Like the opioid epidemic, that's a whole other beast, right?
Yeah.
And sadly, that contributed to a lot of those poisonings.
It did, yeah.
In 2020, it was the leading cause of death for young adults.
Yeah, it's a really serious issue.
That's heavy stuff. So, okay, we've got this huge range of substances, medicines, chemicals, I don't know, venomous critters, plants, you name it.
Right, right.
And it seems like with so many ways for things to go wrong, accidents, intentional poisonings, we need a system, right? Like a way to approach this whole thing.
You absolutely do. And that's where a systematic approach becomes crucial.
Okay, systematic approach sounds very official. What does that actually mean in this context?
Well, think of it like this.
Okay.
It's like a detective solving a case, right? You don't just jump to conclusions. You have to gather all the clues first.
Right, you need the evidence.
Exactly. Same with poisoning management. We start with a risk assessment.
Risk assessment. Okay, so what are we looking for? Like, what are the clues in this case?
So first off, obviously we need to know what the poison is, right?
Of course.
But then it's also like how much was ingested, how long did the exposure last, and even things about the person themselves.
Okay, so like their age, their health, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Age, weight, any other health problems they might have, it all plays a role.
Right, because everyone reacts differently to things.
Absolutely. And timing is huge too.
Timing, how so?
Well, think about it. A recent poisoning, like something that just happened, we might try to decontaminate the stomach.
Right, get it out of their system.
But if it's been a while, then we might need a totally different approach.
Wow, so it's really like piecing together a puzzle, huh? But what if someone comes in and they're unconscious? Like you don't even know what they were exposed to.
That's when things get really tricky.
Yeah.
That's where we have to rely on, well, for one thing, good old-fashioned medical detective work, but also we use something called toxidromes.
Toxidromes. Okay, now you have to explain that. What is a toxidrome?
Okay, so imagine this. A patient comes in, their pupils are super tiny, like pinpoints, and they're breathing really slow and shallow.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now, those symptoms together, they might point to an opioid overdose. And that cluster of symptoms, that's a toxidrome.
It's like a fingerprint, but for poisons.
Exactly. It helps us narrow down the possibilities.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm guessing it's not always that clear cut, is it?
You're right, it definitely can be more complicated. Toxidromes are super helpful, but they're not foolproof.
How so?
Well, some poisonings, they can look like other conditions. Like there's some pesticides that can actually mimic a heart attack.
Wow, that's terrifying.
Mhm.
So how do you tell the difference? How do you make sure you're not treating the wrong thing?
That's where the expertise of doctors and nurses and everyone on the medical team is so crucial.
Right, it's not just one thing.
Exactly. A good medical history, a thorough exam, and of course lab tests, they all play a part. And thankfully, we've got amazing resources like poison control centers.
Oh yeah, poison control. They're like the superheroes of the poison world, aren't they?
They really are. They're available 24/7, staffed with experts who can walk you through a potential poisoning, no matter how simple or complex.
That's incredible. So we've talked about identifying the poison, assessing the risk. But what about those crucial first moments after a potential poisoning? What happens then?
Well, it always starts with the basics.
The basics of
Airway, breathing, and circulation, your ABCs. But in toxicology, we add a couple more letters, D and E, making it ABCDE.
the ABC's got a toxicology upgrade. I like it. So what do those extra letters stand for?
D is for disability. We're checking how alert they are, if they're having seizures, any neurological problems. Basically, we're trying to see how the poison is affecting the brain.
That makes sense.
And then E is for exposure. How did they come into contact with the poison? Was it swallowed, inhaled, absorbed through the skin?
Right, because that would change how you treat it, right?
Exactly. It all helps guide our decisions about things like decontamination and antidotes.
Okay, decontamination and antidotes, those are two words that definitely pique my interest.
They're like the bread and butter of poisoning management.
So let's dig into those a little deeper. First up, decontamination. What does that actually involve? Sounds pretty intense.
Well, it can be, but it doesn't always have to be some crazy dramatic procedure. Sometimes it's as simple as removing contaminated clothing or washing the affected area with soap and water.
Oh, okay. So it can be pretty straightforward, but what about when it's not? Like, what if someone swallowed something poisonous?
That's when we might consider things like activated charcoal. Have you heard of that one?
Activated charcoal.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that what they give you in the hospital sometimes? I always wondered how that works.
It's pretty fascinating, actually. Activated charcoal, it's like a super absorbent sponge for toxins. It binds to them in the stomach and
Hmm.
prevents them from getting absorbed into the bloodstream.
So it's like it's soaking up the poison before it can do any damage.
Exactly. It's a surprisingly effective method for many types of poisoning.
Wow, that's incredible. And then there's the other word you mentioned, antidotes. Now, those always seem a bit like magic to me. Like you take this one thing and it magically reverses the effects of the poison. Is it really like that?
Well, not exactly magic, though it can feel that way. Antidotes are fascinating because they're designed to specifically counteract the effects of a particular poison. It's like having a key that fits a very specific lock.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Not at all. There are different types of antidotes, each working in its own unique way. Some work by blocking the poison from binding to its target in the body. Think of it like a shield, preventing the poison from reaching its intended destination.
So it's like a microscopic battle happening within the body, with the antidote swooping in to save the day.
Exactly. And then other antidotes work by actually binding to the poison itself, neutralizing it before it can cause further harm.
So it's like disarming the poison before it can do any more damage.
Precisely. It's a fascinating field, and there's always more to learn and discover.
It's amazing how much science goes into all of this. It's not just about treating symptoms. It's about understanding the poison, how it works, and how to counteract it on a molecular level.
You got it. It's all about using the right tools and knowledge to give the body the best chance of fighting back.
And speaking of fighting back, we've talked about antidotes that neutralize the poison, but what about helping the body get rid of it faster?
Ah, that's where enhanced elimination comes in. It's like giving your body's natural detoxification processes a little boost.
A boost. How do we do that?
Well, there are a couple of main approaches. Corporeal, meaning we're working from within the body, and extracorporeal, which involves methods outside the body.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's start with corporeal methods. What are some examples of those?
So we've talked about activated charcoal, which is a great example of a corporeal method, but there's also something called urinary alkalinization. Basically, we adjust the pH of the urine, making it more alkaline.
And how does that help get rid of the poison?
It's all about manipulating the chemistry. By making the urine more alkaline, we can trap certain types of poisons, preventing them from being reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. This encourages the kidneys to flush them out more effectively.
It's like we're tweaking the body's plumbing system to redirect the toxins out as efficiently as possible.
Exactly. It's pretty amazing what we can achieve by understanding the body's natural processes and giving them a little nudge in the right direction.
And what about extracorporeal methods? Those sound a bit more, shall we say, high-tech,
They definitely are. Extracorporeal means outside the body, and these methods involve using external devices to remove the poison from the bloodstream.
like a dialysis machine.
You got it. Hemodialysis is one example. It's often used for kidney failure, but it can also be incredibly effective at removing certain poisons.
So you're basically filtering the blood and removing the toxins directly.
Precisely. We can also use a similar technique called hemoperfusion, which uses a special filter that's specifically designed to remove certain types of poisons.
It sounds like these extracorporeal methods are reserved for more serious cases.
They often are. These procedures come with their own risks and considerations, so we only use them when absolutely necessary.
Makes sense. It's all about weighing the risks and benefits for each individual patient.
Absolutely. Every poisoning case is unique, and it requires careful consideration and a tailored approach.
Well, this has been incredibly eye-opening. I had no idea poisoning management was such a complex and fascinating field.
It really is. There's always more to learn, and new advancements are being made all the time. But one thing that remains constant is the importance of a systematic approach. By carefully assessing the situation, understanding the poison, and utilizing the right tools and techniques, we can significantly improve outcomes for those affected by poisoning.
It's like you said earlier, it's all about being a medical detective.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, from the basics of poison identification to the complexities of advanced life support. And it's clear that this is a topic that deserves even more attention and exploration.
I agree.
So for our listeners who are eager to dive even deeper into this fascinating world, stay tuned because we'll be back with more insights and information in our next episode.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, everyone. Hemodialysis for poisoning. So you're basically giving someone's blood a detox bath. That's pretty wild, but how does that actually work?
It's a pretty amazing process, actually. Basically, the machine circulates the person's blood through a special filter that removes the toxins.
Okay, so it's like a superfine sieve that catches the bad stuff.
Kind of. The filter is a membrane with tiny holes that allow certain molecules to pass through while others get trapped.
So it's separating the blood and the toxins based on their size.
That's a big part of it. Larger molecules are less likely to squeeze through those tiny holes. But it's not just about size, though.
What else comes into play?
Well, we also have to consider how well the toxin dissolves in water and how much it likes to stick to proteins in the blood. Some toxins are like clingy friends, they just won't let go.
So if a toxin is really good at sticking to proteins, it's harder to remove, even if it's small.
Exactly. It's like trying to filter out sand that's stuck to a big sticky piece of candy. Not easy.
Okay, so it's a bit more complicated than just using a strainer. It's about understanding the chemical properties of the toxin, too.
You got it. It's all about chemistry. Now, what about hemoperfusion? We talked about that briefly earlier.
Yeah, hemoperfusion. That one sounds even more intense than hemodialysis. How is it different?
Well, if hemodialysis is like using a general filter, hemoperfusion is like bringing in a specialized cleaning crew.
A cleaning crew. Okay, now I'm really curious.
So instead of a regular filter, we use a cartridge that's filled with either charcoal or resin. These materials are chosen because they're really good at attracting certain types of toxins. It's like they have a magnetic pull for them.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's like a targeted approach, specifically designed to remove a particular poison.
Yeah, exactly. And it's particularly useful for those stubborn toxins that love to bind to proteins in the blood, the ones that regular hemodialysis might not catch so easily.
It sounds incredibly effective. But are there any downsides to using hemoperfusion?
Well, like any medical procedure, there are always potential risks and benefits to weigh.
Of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch in medicine, right?
Right. Hemodialysis and hemoperfusion, they both come with risks. And on top of that, those specialized cartridges we talked about for hemoperfusion, they're expensive and they can get full pretty quickly. So we have to replace them often. That's why we don't just use these techniques willy-nilly. We have to carefully consider each patient's individual situation.
It's a judgment call, then. How do you decide which method to use? It sounds incredibly complex.
You're telling me. There are guidelines and algorithms we can follow, but ultimately it comes down to the specifics of the case.
Right, because every poisoning is different. Every person is different.
Exactly. So we look at things like the type of poison, how much was ingested, how long ago it was ingested, and then we also factor in the patient's age, their overall health, any other medical conditions they might have. It's a lot to juggle.
It sounds like it. So it's not just about knowing the techniques, it's about knowing when and how to apply them.
That's what makes this field so challenging and rewarding. It's like putting together a puzzle, using all the pieces of information we have to make the best possible decision for the patient. Speaking of puzzles, how do those corporeal methods we talked about earlier fit into all of this?
Ah, yes. Corporeal methods. So that's where we're working with the body's own systems to enhance elimination, right?
Exactly. We're giving the body a helping hand to get rid of the poison faster.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We touched on activated charcoal before. Is there anything more to know about that?
Yeah, actually. Did you know that giving multiple doses of activated charcoal can be super helpful for certain types of poisoning?
Multiple doses. I thought it was just a one and done kind of thing.
It can be, but for some substances, giving repeated doses is much more effective.
So how does that work? Why is it better to give it multiple times?
It's all about maximizing the charcoal's ability to trap the poison. You see, the charcoal binds to the toxin in the gut, preventing it from being absorbed into the bloodstream.
Right, like a sponge.
Exactly. But eventually, that charcoal, with all the poison it's absorbed, is going to move through the digestive system. By giving multiple doses, We're essentially setting up a continuous cycle of absorption and removal, making sure there's always fresh charcoal on hand to capture any poison that might be trying to sneak back into the system.
Ah, so it's like a continuous cleaning process.
Exactly. We're being proactive and making sure the poison doesn't get a chance to cause any more trouble.
I love it. It's such a simple concept, but so clever.
Oh.
And what about the other method you mentioned, urinary alkalinization?
Oh, yeah, that one. That's where things get a little more, shall we say, intricate.
Intricate in a good way, I hope.
Definitely. It's a bit more complex than activated charcoal, but the basic principle is actually pretty straightforward. It's all about manipulating the pH of the urine.
The pH, like making it more acidic or basic.
Exactly. We can adjust the pH to either trap or release certain toxins, depending on their chemical properties.
Okay, so it's about creating the optimal environment in the urine to encourage the toxin to exit the body.
You got it. We're essentially using the body's own waste disposal system to our advantage. It's pretty elegant, really.
It's like we're tricking the toxins into taking the express route out of the body.
Yeah.
But all of this, it really highlights just how important it is to have a deep understanding of toxicology when it comes to poisoning management, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just about knowing a few antidotes. It's about understanding the intricate dance between poisons and the body, knowing which buttons to push, which levers to pull to guide the body toward recovery. But there are times, I'll admit, when even our best efforts and most sophisticated techniques aren't enough.
Really? What happens in those situations? What are the options when things get really serious?
Well, in the most critical cases, we have to call in the big guns. We turn to advanced life support technologies like ECMO, which stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation.
ECMO. Okay, that one sounds pretty heavy duty.
It is. It's a bit like putting the body on temporary life support.
No.
Essentially, ECMO does the work of the lungs, and sometimes even the heart, circulating and oxygenating the blood outside of the body.
So it's like giving the body a break, a chance to rest and recover while the machine takes over those vital functions.
Exactly. It's an incredible technology that's given us a fighting chance in situations that would have been considered hopeless just a few decades ago.
It's really remarkable what medical science can do these days. But it also makes you realize just how important prevention and early intervention are.
Absolutely. Prevention is always the best medicine.
We've covered so much ground today, from the intricate science behind antidotes to the remarkable technologies used in severe cases. It's clear that poisoning management is a vast and constantly evolving field.
It certainly is.
It really is mind-blowing when you think about all the tools and techniques that are out there to help people in these situations. So as we wrap up our deep dive into poisoning management, what would you say is like the biggest takeaway? What should people really remember from all of this?
You know, if there's one thing I want people to take away from this, it's the importance of a systematic approach.
Systematic approach, right? So not just like, oh, they've got a headache, give them some aspirin. We need to think bigger picture, right?
Exactly. We have to treat the poison, not just the symptoms. And that means understanding what the poison is, how it works in the body, and really considering each patient's unique situation.
It's like you said before, being a medical detective, you got to gather all those clues before you can solve the case.
Precisely. And that's why resources like poison control centers are so crucial.
Oh yeah, we can't forget about poison control. They're like the first line of defense in so many situations, aren't they?
They really are. They have a wealth of knowledge at their fingertips, and they're available 24/7 to help anyone who needs it.
That's incredible. No matter what time of day or night, there's always someone there who can walk you through a potential poisoning.
Exactly. And don't let embarrassment stop you from calling. They've heard it all, trust me. Better safe than sorry, right?
Absolutely. It's so reassuring to know that resources always available.
Well, this has been an incredible journey. I feel like I've learned so much about a topic I knew surprisingly little about.
Me too. It's been great diving deep into this with you.
And for our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the complex and often surprising world of poisoning management. We hope you found it as fascinating as we did. Remember, knowledge is power, and knowing even a little bit about this topic could make all the difference in a critical situation. Stay curious, everyone.